The monitor's beep becomes a metronome. One short tone, two, then another, steady, mechanical, indifferent. In a suite on the top floor, sunlight tries to push through heavy curtains and only manages to touch the polished edge of a mahogany desk. The rest of the room is clinical. A hospital bed, a tangle of tubes, a small child's body stretched across thin sheets. Her face is pale as paper. Her tiny chest rises and falls with the effort of someone who has already walked to the edge of time. She has roughly an hour, Dr. Vasconcelos says without drama. His voice is the sound of a man trained to be precise where panic would be imprecise. If we don't find a 100% compatible donor and start an emergency transfusion, her chances drop by the minute. The phrase lands like a stone. 1 hour. The room narrows. The monitor's bright numbers blink with cruel indifference. Saulo Cabral stands near the window where the city's skyline is a glittering, indifferent crowd of glass and steel. He wears an expensive suit that seems oddly out of place in the antiseptic light. For a moment, he looks like a spectator in his own life. Then he moves. "Name anything," he says, voice hard as coin. "Name the price. I will fly whoever you need in right now, I will." "You can't purchase compatibility," Dr. Vasconcelos interrupts gently but firmly. "Biology isn't negotiable." Saulo's jaw tightens. He has spent the last 30 years learning how to make inconveniences go away with signatures and phone calls. Money has been a tool, a solvent. Today, the tool refuses to dissolve the problem. Outside the glass door of the suite, a nurse taps the phone screen and sets up a line for the lab. Another nurse washes hands with the practiced ritual of repetition. The air smells faintly of antiseptic and citrus cleaner. It is in that smell, cleaning product and coffee breath, that a woman works with the economy of movement learned from long shifts and lower wages. Marina pushes a cart. Her gloves are thin, and her sleeves have tiny bleach stains near the cuff. She moves in the periphery of doors and blinds, the kind of person whose presence fills rooms only in utility. A mop slung across her arm, scattered paper towels in a bin, a face that knows how to soften when someone else needs to be soothed. No one asks where she comes from. No one catalogues the smallness of her life. She had been on the morning shift when the emergency arrived, a whisper in a corridor, a rush of footsteps. She had seen a black SUV arrive, a uniformed attendant carrying a child, and then the room opening up into crisis. She had finished what she was doing and kept moving, as if moving were how to measure the tempo of survival. In the suite, the child's fingers are small as buttons. Her name, according to the chart tacked by the IV pole, is Beatriz Cabral. Beatriz. The name smells of careful branding, the kind of name you place on a life and then protect with the private fences of money and lawyers. There is a second name scribbled at the top of the admission form, Luce. It is written in a different hand, smaller, as if someone had added it later, a note folded into the official line. Saulo hovers by the bedside. He leans closer than dignity allows and touches the child's wrist with fingers used to calculating markets, not measuring breaths. He had pushed through the hospital's private corridors, told his security to clear the elevators, sent for a specialist, and paid for whatever it took. None of his gestures, however, rearrange the logic of blood and immune systems. A lawyer in a pressed suit arrives, breathless. He brings an envelope, papers, a convenience of legal recourse. A hospital administrator comes with a polite set of protocols. Everyone does their job, and yet the room's gravity is not the paperwork, but the line of light on the child's neck, where the skin is thin enough for a small brown birthmark to be visible just behind the ear, a crescent, a freckle with a memory. Marina freezes when she sees it. She had seen that same crescent once before, on a different day, a different body. It had been on her son. It had been on the child she carried, and later saw taken from her by hands that smelled of perfume and business cards. They told her the adoption was arranged. They told her the money would be useful. They told her that if she signed, she would be free. She signed with a hand that trembled from hunger and hope. She signed with the idea that the child would be safe. Her memory collapses into a handful of images: a roadside diner, a man folding a check into a napkin, a cramped apartment with a hole in the ceiling where rain made little halos, and the crescent, so small, glowing like a secret in the soft skin behind the ear. That memory was supposed to be a wound she learned to live around. Today it moves up through her body like the first chord of a song. She stops the cart as if she has been struck. Her knuckles whiten on the handle. The smell of disinfectant becomes the smell of a hospital room 14 years ago, or maybe yesterday. She pictures the child she held, the way the child's hair smelled of starch and soap when she curled against Marina's chest, the way her name had been whispered because names make claims that doors sometimes refuse. Saulo is on the phone again, louder now, trying channels that usually answer. Try the private labs. Call Dr. Alemão. Do whatever you have to do. He paces. He is a man used to results. This anguish creates a new currency he has never before learned to spend. Sir, Dr. Vasconcelos says, we can run expedited HLA typing. It takes time. The faster we get a potential donor identified, the better. Family members are prioritized because of statistical compatibility. His eyes flick to the entrance where Marina stands, stunned. Marina had planned for anonymity. Invisibility had been practical. There is safety in being unseen when poverty invites pity or worse, offers you no authority. Today she is seen, not because anyone sought her out, but because the room asked for eyes, and her own had recognition. Her mouth moves before she decides the words are possible. The crackle of the intercom, the turning of a clock that isn't on any wall. The city presses quiet in the glass beyond. That's my mark, she hears herself say, voice thin like a thread. That mark. My baby had that. For a second the room tilts. Someone laughs nervously. A nurse shuffles. Saulo's face, for the first time since they wheeled in the child, loses its controlled edge and turns a shade of rawness that money doesn't buy. Disbelief, then anger, and something else, something on the edge of fear. Who are you? Saulo asks, almost a challenge. My name is Marina, she says. She understands suddenly that revealing a memory is an act of claiming. I had a daughter. No, Saulo begins, but the word dies. The confession pulls at the seam of the room. It's not an accusation as much as a ripping of a hidden cloth into air. Marina steps closer to the bed, as if proximity might stitch the past to the present. Her hands are small, her nails raw from scrubbing. There is a scar on her palm where a mop handle once bit. She reaches out to touch the child's hair, and her fingers tremble. Dr. Vasconcelos watches with a conservator's caution. He cannot allow emotions to override procedures, but he cannot, in good faith, ignore what the woman says. We can take a blood sample, he says quietly. We will run a rapid compatibility test. If there is a maternal match, it changes our options. Saulo's laugh is half a sob. You expect me to... He gestures toward Marina as if gesturing could erase a life. How could this be true? Who are you? What proof do you have? Marina doesn't have proof. She has a photograph folded in the lining of her bag, a child's face in softer focus, a younger Marina, smiling with a kind of resilience. She has the memory of the night she signed papers that promised a better life for a child she could not feed. She has guilt, a different sort of hunger stitched into her ribs, but proof is suddenly less crucial than the weight of the risk the doctors face, the hour ticking away in the monitor's unblinking lights. The hospital becomes a small arena where identity and money and urgency clash. Saulo makes a phone call with a voice that tries to reinstate authority. He summons people who might smooth the edges, who might whisper explanations that are more palatable. He blames, he questions, he reaches for explanations that would re-establish order, an adoption broker with a slick haircut, an old friend who knows how these things were arranged. But Dr. Vasconcelos is blunt in the way of his trade. Right now, the patient needs a potential donor, he says. We have to act on the medical facts. If the woman is willing to be tested, we will follow the tests. Legality and debates about past mistakes, those happen later. That small intervention, an insistence on the primacy of a child's life over the comfort of image, tilts the room toward a practical imperative. Saulo, who can command, negotiates in quick currency. He offers access to the best labs, private couriers, a specialist flown in on a private plane. He offers legal teams. He offers the things that have always been answers in his life. But the doctor shakes his head. We have resources. We need urgency, blood tests, compatibility screens, family members first. Marina's heart turns over like something small being held underwater. She has not expected this moment to come back with such violence. She had assumed the world would keep moving and her memory would keep her company like an old bruise. Now the bruise is on display, and the child, so small, so inclined to sleep, breathes and fights, and is a compass for decisions she had only ever imagined. "Please," she says, and the single syllable is all pleading and command, the way a person who has little left apart from truth can be when that truth matters. "Please check me. I want to be tested." The staff moves with a brisk clarity. Protocol wraps around the chaos like a practiced hand. A nurse leads Marina to a curtained area. Another nurse takes a small vial, the small click of the cap like a metronome of its own. In the suite, Saulo watches, and the city's glitter becomes irrelevant, like diamonds seen through glass. He watches small hands being ready to give blood, and in that watching he feels his power misplacing its aim. A memory, half muted and startling, finds the edges of Saulo's skin. A younger him, a quick negotiation at a restaurant booth, a piece of paper smoothed across a table, a promise made in the name of gentility. He had thought of adoption as a transaction that left no visible residue. He had thought the world was like his accounts, numbers that could be balanced and closed. "Is that her mother?" asks one of Saulo's aides, voice low, half question, half accusation. It feels less like curiosity and more like the social sorting that happens when two different worlds collide. Marina feels their eyes like weather. She wants to shrink and claim the safety of being unseen again. But the child's existence is loud and unnegotiable. The waiting is a different kind of pain. The lab performs a rapid HLA screen, a test that will not give every answer but can tell if there is a match strong enough to make maternal transfusion feasible. The nurse runs the sample through the point-of-care machine. A small printer clatters, a fraction of numbers appears, and then more waiting. The monitor in the suite gives the child's heart rate like a measure of the seconds left. Saulo's phone vibrates a dozen times. He ignores it. Outside the curtain, Marina's breath comes in small mechanical pulls. She is not the only one who has lived with a hunger she pretends not to notice. Poverty had made her bones. She eats less to keep a child fed once, then keeps a child's memory fed instead. Now she feels thinner than she remembers, as if the act of being asked to give could be the very thing that empties her. But there is resolve. She has loved without title. She has kept names inside her. She will claim this love into action. "Do you have family here?" the nurse asks, more out of procedure than curiosity. "A sister," Marina says, and the truth is small and sharp. "But she is in another city. She has no means." "What about a record? Any identifying papers?" The question is clinical, not unkind. Marina rummages in her bag and produces a photograph, a faded Polaroid, her with a baby in her arms, both smiling in a way poverty sometimes encourages, a hard-fought joy. The paper trembles in her fingers. In the suite, Saulo watches all of it with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. He had been a man who believed in systems, banks, contracts, controlled narratives. He had built a life that could buy anonymity and purchase the appearance of goodness. He had not expected history to come back to him in the form of a freckle behind a child's ear. "Do the test," he says finally, in a voice that has aged a decade in an hour. It is less command than plea, and in that tone something shifts between them. The man who thinks in ledgers and the woman who knows hunger by the way it throbbed under her ribs. A clock on the wall, an institutional white disk with hands, marks the passage of minutes like a judge. The doctor steps out into the hallway and confers with technicians. Nurses move in practiced choreography. Outside, the city continues, indifferent. A delivery truck idles. A young father in the waiting room smooths a child's hair. The lab result printer finally spits out a thin strip of paper that rustles like a small flag. Dr. Vasconcelos receives it with a considered silence. He does not theatrically read it aloud. His profession has taught him to let facts exist before they become drama. "There is a high likelihood of maternal compatibility," he says. The words are precise, high likelihood, not certain, and each syllable carries the weight of cautious hope. The monitor's beeps in the suite pace like a heartbeat, temporarily granted a soft reprieve. For a heartbeat, the room loosens its taut chords. Hope is not a magic. It is arithmetic multiplied by courage. Saulo's hand goes to his throat, as if the truth might strangle him or redeem him. The lawyer exhales and writes things down, the kind of paperwork that will be used to unpick webs and account for choices. Marina feels a currency of a different sort flow into her, relief so sharp it aches. Then the doctors map out next steps. Cross-match, preparing blood products, mobilizing staff. Time has not stopped. There is still the reality that the transfusion is not a guarantee. Blood works by complex chemistry, not by moral righteousness. But there is an option where there was none a breath ago. Saulo looks at Marina as if he has finally seen a painting he once owned and now recognizes the artist. He had been blind to the traces of his own life. He had not understood the cost embedded in human exchange. That glance holds a world of questions, and buried inside them regret. "You saved me," he says before he thinks. The phrase is inadequate and wrong, in the way that all first attempts are inadequate to a true confession. It regards her as instrument, and she is not. She is a woman who had been invisible by design and is now painfully present. Marina does not answer immediately. The room is full of people who will create narratives. The cameras of gossip will find angles. The lawyers will have their briefs. The city's rumor mills will begin to spin. But in the small space between Beatrice's pulse and the machines, Marina hears the echo of promises she learned to keep alone. "I want to be tested," she repeats, steadier now, "not because of what he can give me, because she is my daughter." The words are a claim and a plea at once. They do not fit neatly into Saulo's ledger. They do not require a check. They require recognition. Dr. Vasconcelos nods and begins to orchestrate the logistics with the quiet authority of someone who knows how to thread promises into actions. Nurses wheel in equipment, scrub in and out, and the tone of the room shifts from accusation to procedure. Blood drawn from Marina, a second sample taken from the child. Labels are fixed, numbers confirmed. The monitor's blink is relentless. Saulo stands back. For the first time in his experience, money does not accelerate the necessary motion. There are no private lab shortcuts that can change HLA compatibility. His frustration sharpens into something else, shame braided with helplessness. He leans against the window and watches the city like a man coming to grips with the limits of his empire. Outside, a car horn sounds, distant. The sun lowers a bit and the light in the suite turns thin and blue, clinical. Inside, human time is reconfigured by a printer, a vial, and a freckle. The minutes stack like pages. The lab runs another check to confirm the initial indication. The staff prepares for the worst and hopes for the best. Marina sits with a paper cup of hospital tea that tastes like nothing and everything at once. She folds her hands and thinks of the child she lost, the decisions she had made that led to this moment, the small acts of care she never advertised. Saulo pulls a chair to the bedside and takes the child's hand. This act is public atonement before an audience of machines. He speaks in a voice that is not fully his, as if borrowed from a man who had read the lines before. "Beatriz," he says, the name catching on his tongue. "Beatriz, come back to us." The child's eyelids flutter. Her skin, previously a paper-pale map, takes on the ghost of color. The monitor beeps faster, which is both fright and hope. Doctors confer in clipped phrases, a lifelong habit that keeps doomsday at bay. The compatibility report prints another line. Dr. Vasconcelos reads it with the same clinical detachment that had steadied the room earlier. "This confirms a strong maternal-type compatibility," he announces. "It's consistent with a biological relationship. We can proceed with maternal-directed transfusion protocols if the donor is able to tolerate the procedure." There is a weight to that last clause. Tolerance. Marina hears it like a second heartbeat, and she knows what it implies. She will give, and giving has a cost. She is not in peak health. She has not fed herself well in months because food budgets for cleaning crews are thin. There is a pale film under her eyes that suggests a life of scarcity. But the fact of that scarcity does not give her the luxury of hesitating. Saulo's face is a terrain of emotion. Money, he realizes, would not just buy the procedure. It would buy a kind of solace he has never had, time to face what he failed to protect. He sees in the photograph Marina had shown the nurse his own hand in a blur, a younger him, distracted by the world. He had not expected that his neglect or his choices would call him so bluntly to account. "Will it hurt?" Marina asks, not because fear freezes her, but because she has to understand the terms of her action. "Donating blood is safe in controlled conditions," the nurse replies. "We will monitor you. If at any point you display signs of instability, we will stop. The priority is both lives." The clause again, both lives. In that sentence, the hospital recognizes Marina as having a life of equal value to the child in the bed. It is a small constitutional rearrangement of worth that had been missing in small daily ways. At the bus stop, in the borrowed apartment, at the grocery store where she chose cheaper cuts of food, so small hands could have dinner. Saulo steps forward, the first true movement beyond his position of wealth. "If anything happens," he begins, and stops because nothing he can pronounce will reverse the act itself. He reaches into his suit, and instead of reaching for a check, he touches the skin of the child, like an apology that has no proper word. Marina looks at him, and something like old history shifts under both of them. There is no one-size restitution for past absence. "Do it," she says. "Do the test. If it matches, I will donate." There is a murmur of preparations. A nurse fits a tourniquet, the cold touch of disinfectant on a forearm, the small prick for a blood sample. The machine reads, the printer ticks, and the room waits with the patience of those who must hold breath in order to act. Outside, the city lights begin their evening chorus. In the suite, the sun dims. The monitor's beeps carve out the remainder of the hour. A clock on the wall moves with definitive indignation. The moment narrows into choices. A final result prints. Dr. Vasconcelos unfolds it and reads, "This is a high maternal match," he says again, softer this time, as if repetition helps the room accept a truth that has the force of mercy. Statistically consistent with parentage. Saulo's hand drops from the child's wrist. He looks at Marina, not with the transactional line of a man used to deals, but with something closer to recognition. It unsettles him, and that unsettledness takes shape as an old ache. Marina's knees go weak, A nurse steadies her without asking. The nurse's touch is small and human, not patronizing. Marina swallows. She feels the gravity of giving. She has never been in a position where giving might cost her life. She has given from depletion before, time, comfort, but this would be precise and exact. She looks at the child's face, at the crescent mark like a small compass, and then at the city beyond the window where Saulo built a kingdom. "I'll do it," she says. The room rearranges itself into motion, lists checked, forms signed in the urgent shorthand of consent. Saulo stands aside while the doctor explains risk in the clinical tone of someone who is careful to never promise miracles. The nurse completes the donor workup, asking questions about medication, recent illnesses, weight, small boxes that must be ticked honestly. Marina answers with a bluntness born of hard-earned truth. As the curtains pull back and staff wheel in the equipment, a silence falls that is not empty, but full of expectation. The monitor beeps in a rhythm that tastes like a countdown. The hour is not over. One option has opened in the mechanics of medicine, the possibility that maternal blood could provide the child with what she needs right now. Saulo reaches for something invisible and unexpected. He reaches for a hand that belongs to him in name. He is not offering money now. He is offering the small presence of a father who is being asked finally to participate in a life he once believed he could purchase from a distance. His manner is clumsy, as if he is rehearsing language for a role he has never earned. Marina meets his hand for a moment and feels the heat of it, a warmth unrelated to wealth. The contact is not epiphany. It is duty and chance intersecting. The sweet remembers an earlier life of choices, and in that remembered space, new options have been carved out by a freckle's insistence and a woman's willingness to stand. The clock on the wall slides toward a new minute. The team prepares for the maternal-directed transfusion. Orders are confirmed. The IV lines are readied. A nurse hands Marina a paper gown. The soundscape tightens. Footsteps, the soft rattle of a cart, the beep on the monitor that marks the heart's fragile argument for more minutes. Outside the suite doors, the city hums, and a black SUV idles, forgotten for the moment. "Please," Marina whispers, and the word is not only for the child, it is for a life she once imagined, and for a future she hopes will not be bought but earned. It is for recognition. At the threshold of action, the room pauses. The monitor beeps. The hour waits like a held breath. Then the team moves. "Keep it flowing," Dr. Vasconcelos calls, voice tight with the discipline that keeps panic from multiplying. The suite narrows into tasks. Labels, clamps, gloves, a soft hiss of oxygen. The beep steady like a metronome. Outside, the city is an indifferent light. Inside, every breath matters. A nurse slides a needle into the line. The first bag takes its slow, patient gravity and becomes a small river. Red threads thread the child's IV. For a moment the room holds its breath with the machines. Beatrice, loose, takes a deeper breath. Color returns to her lips like a timid tide. Her eyelids flutter. The numbers on the monitor climb in small, promising increments. Someone exhales a long animal sound. Saulo lets his shoulders drop an inch and thinks he can feel time unclench. Then Marina staggers. One moment she's holding a paper cup and watching through the clear plastic curtain. The next she is pale as the hospital sheets, sweat beading at her hairline. Her knees fold. The cup slips from her fingers and hits linoleum with a small, awful sound. "Donor down!" someone shouts, the phrase surging the room back into high tension. The beeps change timbre, sharp, urgent. The team that moments ago had been the orchestra of careful procedure becomes a single, honed instrument, moving in practiced, exacting lines. Saulo moves before thought catches up. He is at Marina in 2 strides, reaching for a hand that is not his. For the first time that day, money is irrelevant. His gestures are useless and therefore honest. Marina's eyes are half closed. There is a hollowness in them that alarms more than color ever did. She tries to make a sound, and nothing forms. Her chest pulls shallow and fast. The nurse who had steadied her last week now becomes the person who grasps for answers in the only language the body will accept. Intervention. They place her on a gurney. The beeps of the monitors mark the seconds. Saulo follows, barefooted in his metaphoric armor. He hears, in the capillary quickness of his mind, the past unspooling, a check folded into a napkin, the distance between hands that sign and hands that hold, the way he had once mistaken presence for provision. She was undernourished, one of the nurses tells Dr. Vasconcelos, in clipped sentences that smell of clinical fact, not accusation. Low hemoglobin baseline. She tolerated the initial draw, but the donation likely pushed her below compensatory threshold. The words are precise. They are not blame. They are the anatomy of how scarcity can turn into crisis. Short sentences compress the room. Compressions. A flat paddle paddles air. Defibrillator pads, safer to show than to teach. Kiss the skin. The nurse calls rhythms in clipped, practiced syllables. The team moves with the steadiness of people who have practiced being violent to the silence of death so often that their hands know the choreography. Saulo watches them fight for Marina and feels his world shrivel to a single line on a monitor. He is not allowed to hold everything together by a signature. He cannot buy her back from the floor. He is left with two options: watch or do the humiliating work of being present. He chooses the second without language, and what that looks like is odd and new. A man in an expensive suit sitting beside a stretcher like a child waiting at a school gate. Memories come in quick slivers. A cheap diner, the way Marina had wrapped a blanket around a sleeping infant. The sound of his own voice somewhere in the background as he negotiated a solution that later became an absence. Regret does not explain things. It simply presses like a stone in the chest. They rush Marina to ICU. The corridor is a blur of humming lights. Saulo rides with the gurney, hand on the vinyl, watching paramedics and nurses who do a kind of urgent translation from the immediate to the possible. He hears phrases that feel like liturgy: airway, support, stabilize, and knows them to be actions, not absolutions. In the suite, the child's monitors continue, more stable now, like fragile promises that need attendance. The transfusion did what it could. Blood does not know who earned it. It circulates, it carries oxygen, it resets chemistry. Lucy's fingers find Saulo's hand and grip like a child's claim to what little is left of the hour. At the ICU door, Dr. Vasconcelos places a hand on Saulo's shoulder, the gesture both professional and human. "We did everything right for the child," he says. "We are doing everything we can for Marina. Right now, we need time and careful monitoring." Time. The word is a new currency in Saulo's world. He had always had it in abundance: appointments, dinners, investments that matured, but not like this, not measured in heartbeats and compressed breaths. Saulo sits in the waiting room, a glass of hospital coffee gone cold in his hands. He is an island, ornamented with papers, summoned by anxieties and attorneys, and the sudden bureaucracy of paternity that will need to be audited and rewritten. His aides hover with the flaccid gestures of people whose jobs are to fix things within parameters that no longer contain the problem. He can feel the gaze of the city on him, in the way the fluorescent light leaches warmth. He cannot reach Marina behind the double doors. He cannot smooth the past. What he can do, in the immediate naked economy of fear, is to be present. He makes the decision very slowly and then suddenly. He signs nothing. He buys nothing. He sits by the child's bed. He prays quietly, in a language he had abandoned after a very long adolescence, with faith that cost less than being present to a life. Meanwhile, in ICU, Marina crosses thin walls back into herself. She hears a faint voice she recognizes as belonging to Dr. Vasconcelos over the mechanical hum of ventilators and pumps. She feels a pinch of something cooling at her temples. Her vision fogs and clears. Faces appear like pages of a book turned quickly. The attending nurse, a resident with eyes that have not slept, Saulo's suit in a blur. Her first coherent thought is practical and small. Luz is breathing. The second thought is wider and louder. She had given something and almost lost everything. The third is a small, fierce gratitude. The child is alive. They work for hours, stabilize, replace fluids, monitor. There are no cinematic miracles, only sweat, skill, and the steady application of knowledge. At one point, a nurse holds Marina's hand so she will not float away into a grey place. That hand is rough and real. Saulo, watching through glass, feels the raw inadequacy of an entire life of not being there. When Marina finally opens her eyes, it is not a cinematic awakening with choir music. It is a person returning to gravity. Her first movement is to look for the crescent behind Luz's ear. It is still there, a tiny compass that points home. Her fingers, though weak, reach for the child's small hand. The world rearranges by inches. Saulo steps into the room when permitted. The hospital light makes him look halved. The suit seems like armor borrowed from an earlier life. He watches Marina, who is both the woman he ignored and the woman whose blood bought his child's life. Shame, more complicated than pain, crosses his face. He starts, and the sound fails. He remembers suddenly a night when he had folded a check into a napkin and imagined that mothering could be solved by removing the body and replacing it with a contract. He understands now, with a terrible clarity, that what he had exchanged for convenience was the right to be present in a life. Marina's voice is quiet. "You could have come sooner," she says. The words aren't an accusation so much as a ledger entry, what happened and who owes whom. Saulo looks at her and then at Luz. There is an awkward human bargaining that does not involve money. He makes gestures, the kind that once would have been measured by PR teams and press statements. He offers wealth. He offers stability. He offers marriage, a ridiculous, clumsy thing to say in a fluorescent room, as if legal union could substitute years of absence. The offer lands like a check slid across a hospital table, practical, blunt, tone-deaf. Marina accepts the offer of a roof and of money as a practical matter. She will need medical bills covered. She will need the legal acknowledgement that her child is her child. But when Saulo begins to place promises on top of paychecks, marriage as a token of restitution, she draws a line that is small and utterly human. "You can buy furniture and a house," Marina says. Her voice is gentle but immovable. "You can't buy the mornings we missed. You can't buy the years a child's memory builds. I don't want to be bought." The room shifts, not in anger, but in the clarity of someone who knows the difference between restitution and replacement. Marina's terms are simple and radical in their modesty. Presence, not payment. Responsibility, not publicity. Practical commitments that will change the life day to day. She asks, plainly, for legal recognition, immediate custody arrangements that recognize her as the biological mother and guarantee stable health care for Luz. She asks that Saulo take classes, parenting not for credit, but because he needs to learn the ordinary labors of a life he once outsourced. She asks him to move into a home where the child can know both parents in proximity, not in marble-encased visits. She asks for scheduled shared parenting, morning routines, school pickups, bedtime songs. She asks for a public acknowledgement that ends the secrecy and the lies. No press release, but an honest statement that the adoption had been arranged without full consent and now will be corrected with dignity. And then, quieter, she asks for one more thing that surprises even Saulo, that he commit to improving conditions for the invisible workers at his hospital, the cleaners, the orderlies, people whose fatigue he had never considered. They kept this place working while we make arrangements, she says. If you want to make this right, begin by making life better for the people who keep this place running. It is not charity she requests. It is accountability. It is the demand that one life saved should ripple outward and ease the lives of those whose labor had been the unseen foundation of others' comfort. Saulo listens. The phrase, "make life better," has the clumsy moral gravity of a man who realizes that truth must be paired with action. He imagines, awkwardly, the public statement, the committees, the checkboxes, the old muscle in him that has always reduced human problems into manageable spreadsheets flares. This time, though, the spreadsheet wants repair and redistribution not as a bullet point, but as sustained work. He takes a long breath. He thinks of the small hand clutching his finger in the night when Lucy's gasps had been a different currency. He thinks of Marina's knees on a gurney. He thinks of his own emptiness. Money alone will not be sufficient to fill the slack. "Name it," he says finally. "Tell me what to do." Marina names it with the calm of someone who has lived without the luxury of rhetorical flourish. She lays out a few concrete terms: legal guardianship and immediate recognition of Marina as the child's mother, a plan for shared custody and a calendar of parental duties, full coverage of Luz's medical needs and a fund to ensure Marina's recovery, a commitment from Saulo to step down from the private penthouse life at least part-time and participate in school and home duties, public acknowledgement that will restore Marina's rights without humiliating spectacle, and an institutional pledge to review wages and working conditions for hospital support staff, beginning with a living wage audit. These demands are not a litany for revenge. They are modest, human, and designed to rearrange the ledger of value. They insist that repair must be lived, not simply bought. Saulo nods. He signs legal forms that will start that work. He meets with a lawyer in the hospital the next day and begins, haltingly, a process that will require his presence more than his bank account. He is not the only one to change. The Hospital Human Resources Department, embarrassed by the public attention, begins a review that had been on bureaucratic to-do lists for years. Small committees form, meetings last too long, and accomplish tiny, incremental changes that are the real work of reform. Marina is discharged after a week. She leaves the hospital with a thin smile and a small bag. Luz is wheeled beside her, hair braided the way Marina had once braided it. The city's skyline looks the same from the hospital exit, and yet everything is different by inches. Saulo offers a house at first, an old, small house on the edge of the city, not palatial, not ostentatious. It has a yard that collects sunlight in the afternoons. It has a kitchen with a table big enough for 2 bowls of cereal and a pair of mismatched chairs. It smells faintly of lemon oil and borrowed hope. Marina accepts the house not as a trophy, but as a practical home. She will decorate it with the thrift store treasures she knows how to find. She will cook meals that are real and not showpieces. They sign the legal paperwork that recognizes Marina as the child's mother. There is a soft, public moment, a formality at the courthouse with the quiet presence of a few reporters and more dignity than spectacle. Saulo makes a statement that is awkward and honest in equal measure. He apologizes publicly for the way the adoption had been handled and promises to be present in his child's life. He then goes further. He announces a fund to support hospital workers, the seed of an institutional change he'd never imagined before the hour that almost took Luz. Years of habit do not reverse in weeks. Saulo stumbles at first. He is late for school pickups. He learns to fold tiny shirts. He gets laughed at by teachers for thinking bedtime routines are areas for investment returns. But he shows up. Presence is clumsy at first. It is scraped knees and cartoon reading. It is grocery lists and burning toast, and it is also being the first to change a diaper at 3 a.m. He is not graceful. He is persistent, Marina, who had been a solitary figure for so long, allows herself to accept help. She erects small boundaries with the fierce love of a mother who has to protect a child learning trust. She enrolls in a community college course because there is a part of her that wants more than survival. She begins to save, little by little. She keeps her job at the hospital for a while, then takes on part-time administrative work at the new program Saulo funded, an odd full-circle turn where her experience informs policy. The hospital changes in small human ways. A living wage audit begets adjustments in pay grades for cleaning staff. A nurse manager's memo introduces a break room with better chairs and a fridge that doesn't rattle. Policies that had been paper-thin now have names and budgets attached to them. The changes do not fix everything. They are not a revolution. They are, however, a sign that one life acknowledged can ripple. At home, Luce, who prefers the name the small family calls her, Luce, grows into a child who knows the taste of two worlds and chooses a third that is her own. She learns to make paper boats with Marina and to call out to Saulo in the mornings with a voice that expects both parents to answer. She loves both routines, the sound of Saulo's gravelly singing as he burns toast and the quiet songs Marina hums as she folds small pajamas. In the evenings, the house glows with an ordinary light. Saulo learns that doing laundry is not symbolic, it is an act of care. Marina learns that asking for help does not make her less strong. They bicker and then soothe. They remap roles into something negotiated and mutual. The big gestures fade into a long summer of small daily actions that become the scaffolding of a new life. One afternoon, a year after the night the monitor read 1 hour, the family sits in the small yard. Luce runs a race around the fig tree, hair tied with a ribbon that Marina bought at a second-hand market. Saulo, in a plain shirt, chews a sandwich and claps like a man who has learned how to celebrate for reasons that have nothing to do with returns. Marina watches them both with a look that is equal parts tired and ferocious with love. They laugh easily now. Saulo helps Marinata with groceries, and sometimes he asks the cashier where the fruit sale is. He has learned to be small in a way that does not crush him. He has also learned to listen. He attends a monthly meeting to monitor the hospital workers' fund. He meets cleaners in the cafeteria without hesitation. He learns their names, real names, not the titles his accountants used in memos, and his world widens a little each time. The city keeps being the city. Skyscrapers still prick the sky, people still rush, but in one small house on an unremarkable street, a story that began with a monitor's warning and a crescent-shaped birthmark has rewritten a few lives into a different logic. On Lucy's 5th birthday, they set up a small table in the yard and string paper flags. Saulo is clumsy with the cake. Marina's sister, who had returned from another city with a face softened by new kindness, brings a dish that smells like home. They take a photograph, an ordinary snapshot that contains, in its grain, a life that cost more than money. Saulo holds Marina's hand across the table in a way that is not possessive. It is a gesture of partnership. At night, when Luce sleeps, Marina lies awake sometimes and counts the years like small beads. She remembers the hour when she almost lost everything. She remembers the sharp sound of the beeps and the smell of disinfectant. She remembers a man who could not buy biology and a child who clung to life with the stubbornness of the young. She also feels, soft and surprising, the truth of being witnessed and the slow unraveling of old hurts. Saulo sits beside her and, without pretension, asks forgiveness in ways that are clumsy and therefore true. Marina forgives him with conditions. He will show up, stay humble, and keep doing the work he promised. He promises. The promise is not a final absolution. It is a daily contract, renewed by attendance. The small institutional changes they began together are not fanfare or spectacle. They are committees, monthly reports, and slightly better chairs in the break room. They are internal audits that result in an extra dollar on a paycheck for cleaning staff. They are a lunch program for workers' children that had been an idea shelved for years and finally found a budget line. These things will not fix every injustice, but they make certain lives less precarious. In the quiet moments, when Marina and Saulo sweep the porch together and Luz chases a moth across the yard, the past is a shadow that keeps its distance. There is a new kind of wealth in the home, the wealth of being seen and being needed, the wealth of mornings shared, the wealth of small rituals built from nothing and defended with stubborn joy. One late afternoon, months after the crisis and many small reconciliations, Saulo finds Marina in the kitchen, mending a small hole in Luz's sweater. He stands behind her and rests his chin on her shoulder in a gesture that once would have been performative and now is simply a thing two people share. She looks back at him, and for the first time since the hospital she smiles without reservation. "We were invisible in different ways," she says softly. "We missed things," he replies. They do not try to untangle years into neat confessions. They do not try to build time into credits and debits. Instead, they do the messy work of everyday life, which looks less like redemption than like routine, and, in that routine, becomes its own quiet redemption. The monitor's halting metronome that once counted down an hour is now a memory that shaped the rest of their days. Luz grows up, carries both names for a while. Beatriz at school, Luz at home, until she chooses simply to be Luz, a bright, ordinary name that carries light. The city continues to spin, indifferent and immense. But for one family, the world has narrowed into a house with chipped paint and a garden that produces just enough tomatoes for the summer. For them, life is now measured in birthdays and scraped knees, in school recitals, and the slow maturing of trust. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe and share your thoughts below. They will all tell the story differently later. Saulo as the man who learned to be small, Marina as the woman who reclaimed what was taken, Luz as the child who kept breathing because someone chose to stand. But the truth lives in small acts. It lives in the chair by the bedside. It lives in the way a hand steadies another hand. It lives in the sound of a mop being put away and a father's clumsy song at bedtime. Outside, the city waits. Inside, a family eats dinner at a single table and argues over who will wash the plates. It is nothing like the life Saulo once curated. It is, in its ordinary stubbornness, everything.